Growing up on the farm and milking cows, we never took a family vacation. In 1986, my parents had been married 41 years, and we all met at a resort in Minnesota for our first real family vacation. We had such a great time, and this year we hope to have the fifth generation attend the family vacation at the same resort. Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes, has such a reputation for quality water, and today we are visiting with Jared House, who works to protect this great resource. Welcome, Jared.
Thanks, Mary. I'm happy to be here.
Tell us about yourself and what you do.
I am the administrative manager for the Grant County Soil and Water Conservation District. Our office is out of Elbow Lake. I'm the Grant County water planner, so I deal with a lot of water issues within the county that also are issues with the state.
How much water does Minnesota have?
Minnesota is very fortunate. I know everyone says we have 10,000 lakes. It's actually 11,842 lakes that are greater than 10 acres in size. That's a lot of lakes, a lot of recreation to be had. We even have over 69,000 stream and river miles in the state, and over 10 million acres of wetlands. There is a lot of fresh water in Minnesota.
What is meant by water quality?
Well, water quality is the condition of our water, whether it be chemical, physical, or biological. We assess water for those three parameters to make sure that it's healthy for the ecosystem and also healthy for all of us who live here.
How is that measured?
So there are various things that we do to measure water in the state. It depends on what we're looking at, whether it's a lake, a stream, a wetland, or even if it's groundwater. The state has procedures that they've put together in collaboration with the Environmental Protection Agency, the federal agency that has consistency when sampling, and it makes it for faster sampling, having those procedures in place. The samples might be just going out into the middle of the lake, sticking a jug in the water and sending it off to the lab. It might be a technician will have a probe that they can measure things like pH, or we call dissolved oxygen, the stuff that the critters in the water breathe. And it also might be a physical disc that you lower into the water to look at the water clarity. Another thing that happens in the state that I think is great is macroinvertebrates, which are those little critters that don't have a backbone, but you can still see with the naked eye. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency will go out and assess waters to make sure that critters are actually living in there. Because if they're living in there, we have clean water. And some of those critters are more sensitive to pollution and other contaminants.
How often are they measured?
The state of Minnesota has moved over the last 10 years to what's called the watershed approach. There are 80 major watersheds within the state. We're currently standing in the Pomme de Terre River watershed, and this watershed is, to give you a general context and size, goes from Otter Tail County all the way down to Swift County and empties into the Minnesota River. The water is being assessed intensively for a 2-year period every 10 years. There are other organizations like lake associations and soil and water conservation districts that'll go out and collect samples for a particular resource, say Pelican Lake, which is just over this hill here. They might do it annually, they might do it semi-annually, but they try to keep the bigger picture because it's really hard to capture water quality when you're assessing it only every 2 years. So they might try to fill in some of the gaps. But the approach is working because, again, we have 11,842 lakes in Minnesota. It's really hard to assess all of them every single year, all of the time.
What happens to all that information and data?
So the data is compiled by the Minnesota Pollution Control and the Department of Natural Resources. They take that data and they compare it to what we have within the broader spectrum of the state, are standards. But they take all that data that was collected and they compare it to that standard. And if it's lower than the standard, then we know that the water's doing really well. But if it's higher than that, we call that water impaired. And that means that people like myself or the staff in my office need to spend a little extra time on that body of water to try to help get it back to meeting that state standard.
How does water move in Minnesota?
So that's a great question, and I love answering that question. And it all stems from the water cycle. When it rains, The water has several places it could go. The first place is it could be soaked up into the ground. It could go into deep recharge for our aquifers where we draw groundwater. It may just stay shallow within the ground and head its way towards, say, this wetland back here. And anywhere you hear people say there's natural springs, that's where water's moving underground and moving towards those areas. Some other places it might go, and one of actually the biggest users of water is the plants and trees around us. So again, water's hit the ground, it might be soaked up by the plants and transpire back up into the atmosphere. It might pool into that wetland and it might evaporate back up into the atmosphere if it didn't run off the land, which is one of the last things that water could do. If it doesn't go in the ground, if it doesn't evaporate back up into the atmosphere, it'll run off the ground and find the lowest spots. And that could be our lakes, our wetlands, our streams, and our rivers. And all that water just keeps condensing until we get rivers as big as the Mississippi River, right? That's just a very large watershed where it's collecting water from that whole big area and heading to that point.
Jared, how has water movement changed over time?
Yeah, so we have the natural effects of the water cycle, and we as humans have come in and we've altered how water moves on the landscape. Some of the biggest factors are we don't hold water on the land as much as we used to. I mentioned earlier that we have 10 million acres of wetlands in the state. It is believed that we actually had more like 18 million acres at one point in time that have either been drained, paved over for parking lots, and it has changed. The wetlands that we have slow water down. It holds water, allows it to evaporate, and it slowly trickles to our larger bodies of water. But when we take those out and we channelize our streams and ditches, meaning we make them nice and straight, that water gets there really fast. Now, I'm almost referring towards an agricultural land with the channelization of streams, but that also happens in urban settings. We have ditches that go next to roadways. We have storm management systems that are direct conduits to our lakes and rivers. So instead of that water going slowly into the ground, it's being shot down a tube and into a lake or stream. So we've altered the landscape by pushing more water through it and much faster. And it's hard to blame us because we exist, right? We need to build houses, we need agricultural land. So it's just having that understanding helps us move forward, I believe.